Gracias a todos. So, Francisco Suárez's definition of cause as principium per se influens esse in aliud had important, albeit tortuous, history of effects. For a long time, it has been considered as the standard definition in early modern scholasticism. According to various contemporary scholars, it anticipated and paved the way for the reduction of causality to efficiency, which characterized early modern philosophy and science. Leibniz, as can be seen in the first slide, criticized its barbarous use of word influxus. And finally, in recent years, it has been the focus of several scholarly investigations which, although seldom directly dedicated to it, identified the definition of the cause as the imperative point of departure for any examination of Suárez's account of causation. As it turns out, however, Suárez's definition of the cause is much more complex than it might seem at first glance, and the proper understanding of it cannot be reached without placing Suárez's definition within its proper context, which I argue is not scholastic thought in general, but early modern Jesuit scholasticism specifically. In his Disputationes Metaphysicae, Suárez is known for his constant strive to mediate between the main philosophical and theological tradition of the Middle Ages. As it demonstrates, or I try to demonstrate in my inquiry, however, the definition of the cause in general, what Jesuit schoolmen called causa in communi, does not constitute a problem in its own right before the 16th century. Although medieval schoolmen and Aristotle himself generally used a definition of the cause, they did not consider it as something that needed any kind of philosophical discussion. Their use of the definition was acritical, and as a result there was no debate around the definition of the cause as such. It is only with early modern scholasticism that the definition of the cause becomes a philosophical problem in its own right. Please note that I use the label early modern scholasticism in a merely chronological sense here. As I was saying, early modern schoolmen are the first to consider the definition of the cause in communi as a topic of philosophical debate. They criticize the standard definition in use at their time, propose personal solutions, and critically evaluate those of their immediate predecessors. It is in this context, within this debate, that Suárez's definition must be read in order to grasp not only its full meaning, but also its originality on the one hand and its depth with the Jesuit tradition on the other. The paper I have presented for this symposium is focused on providing precisely such a contextualization of Suárez's definition. My analysis begins with a critical examination of the main definition of the cause in use at Suárez's time, which all Jesuit schoolmen refused for similar reasons. In this regard, Suárez's critique, which can be found in Disputatio 12, strongly depends on the remarks already made by his Jesuit predecessors. Over the course of my examination, I have stressed the importance of two traditional definitions in particular. The first, which I call Aristotelian, is an extrapolation from the second book of Aristotle's Physics, but was never proposed by Aristotle himself as a definition of the cause in common. And this is it. Early modern schoolmen rejected this definition because it was either too broad or too narrow according to the way in which one understands the term propter quid, but I cannot go into any detail here about this. The second definition is the one I have called the classic definition of the cause, as it was the dominant one throughout the Middle Ages and was supported by Thomas Aquinas. Not easily ascribable to anyone in particular, as for its origins, at one stage we know that it came to be attributed to the Liber de Causis, but Fonseca readily belied this alleged Neoplatonic heritage. We can see it in slide number 3. And there are many reasons in common why Jesuit schoolmen criticize this definition, but again, I cannot go into very detailed explanation here. But it is important to notice that the critique of traditional definitions is only the pars destruens which precedes the pars construens of the debates on the definition of the cause, namely the proposition of personal definitions by Jesuit authors. In my inquiry, I examined the definitions proposed by Francisco de Toledo, Benet Pereira, Pedro da Fonseca, and Manuel de Goix. But unfortunately, I do not have the time to dwell on each of them here. Let me instead make some general remarks on the debate itself, as it developed in Jesuit scholasticism at the end of 16th century. The many definitions of the cause in communi, proposed in this period by Jesuit authors, all have an underlying structure common to all of them, which I have called the Jesuit paradigm of general causality. We can summarize this paradigm in 5 key points. An ontological conception of causality involving the communication of being from the cause to the effect, both intended as beings and not merely explanatory items. The essential distinction between cause and effect, the per se of the cause, namely its non-accidental character, the natural priority of the cause over the effect, the importance placed on free will, leading to a defense of the causality of secondary causes through concurrentist theories of causation, and finally, according to some, the privilege of efficient causation as a paradigmatic form of causality. Within this general paradigm, we can further distinguish 2 submodels, which I have called the Roman and the Coimbran model, based on the fact that the supporters of the first model, Toledo, Pereira, and Suárez, all taught at the Collegio Romano during their career, whereas the 2 main advocates of the second model, Fonseca and Goix, are both closely linked to the Collegium Conimbricensis. The Roman model conceives causality as influxus, and the Coimbran as dependencia. Contrary to what one might think, however, these conceptions are not necessarily opposed. In fact, Suárez himself is both the strongest supporter of the Roman model, while at the same time conceiving his definition of the cause as a reformulation of Fonseca's definition, with which he explicitly agrees. The main difference between the 2 models is the direction in which one looks at causality. With influxus, I argue, the action of the cause on the effect is privileged. With dependencia, the link of dependency between the effect and its cause gets highlighted. So, although not merely a quibble about words, the whole dispute on the best definition of the cause in Jesuit scholasticism is undoubtedly all about the choice of the right term to express the ratio communis of the cause. The common feature which allows us to tell what a cause, regardless of this, the common feature which allows to tell us what a cause is, regardless of its genus. This problem also adds some serious theological implications, because the way in which one defines causality must allow to rule out in Trinity that God is the cause of the Son. But I will not dwell on this theological complication, of course. So when Suárez defines the cause as principium per se influens esse in aliud, he is making a meticulously pondered choice for each composing term. In my inquiry, I try to show the history of each of these terms, how they arrived to Suárez, and why he chose them. As it turns out, Suárez inherited all of them, and those that he made up personally, he conceived as an answer to what he considered as mistakes made by his most proximate predecessors. I have summarized here some of the important terms, which I will not dwell on. So I cannot go into detail, but my paper contains an extensive contextualization of each composing term of Suárez's definition, giving rise to a new understanding of Suárez's definition based on the evidences deriving from this contextualization. So here is the Suárez definition in context, as you can see, and in the last slide you will find some of the conclusions that I summarized here. They are hard to summarize in 10 minutes, so they are explored in my paper more fully. Thank you.